So, good day, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is David Levi-Faur, and I'm both co-author and also chair of this webinar series on trust and regulation. Happy to see you with us. And with me, my co-author for this paper is Ilya Lokshin from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. This is a joint project in many respects. I will tell you about it more, but I will start the presentation 10 minutes and then we'll give Ilya will present the findings and the analytical statistical method for the rest of the presentation. So we are speaking about 10 minutes, 20 minutes of Ilya, and then Q&A. Let us start and see if it works. And I will say that what we do in this webinar is exploring the relations of trust and regulation, right? Trust and regulation, trust and rules are two mechanisms of social, political, economic, administrative coordination. So if we coordinate, we can use one of those two mechanisms, right? Either trust our colleagues, our fellow citizens, or our government, or we can create a system of rules which governs every interaction. So the issue is central. It's central to social order, right? Social, political, democratic order. How do we govern ourselves? What is this mix between the trust and rules, right? This is the topic. Got it? If so, let me show it in writing via the slides presentations that we prepared. Right? I hope that you see it. And we call regulation the visible end. And the invisible bond is the trust, right? So how trust and regulation interact? How much trust? How much regulation? Which type of regulation? Which type of trust? This is our topic, right? And I told you that this is a joint project, meaning that many people are working on it. It started with a project, EU Horizon project called Tigre, where I first did the survey on trust and regulation. This was my part there back then, a few years ago, and was completed now in a paper which is Introduction for a Special Issue on the relation between trust and regulation. And in this paper that was written with Bernardo Ranguni and Cohen Ferust and was published this year, we distinguish between 5 types of interaction between trust and rules, right? And those types are being sort of distinguished by the degree in which trust and regulation are more or less in cooperation with each other, and the degree of interaction, because it doesn't given that trust and regulation will be in intensive interactions. They can work in separate spheres of the social democratic life without interaction. So there are degrees. And those 5 way of thinking about the interaction between trust and regulation are presented in this paper with Kuhn and Bernardo. And of course, there were other people who were part of this project according via the years. Libby Maman is one of them, joined early who worked on the project, Tigre project. But now Ilya, Sharon, and Sharon Matskin, Shachaf Zamir, and others are working on this project as well, on different aspects of this project as well. So what do I mean that trust and regulation has 5 different ways of interactions? One is the substitutive, meaning that, as you see there on the slides, that trust and regulation exists to substitute each other. If you have good rules, you don't need trust. If you have trust, you don't need rules. This is the substitutive idea. You say there, I start with it. And you see, I'm not speaking about causation now, I'm speaking about association. Systems of governance, organization, groups, countries that have more or less trust. Some countries need a lot of trust, some countries need a lot of rules, right? Now, another option, another theory is that the relations between trust and regulations are complementary. You need more trust in order to have more regulation. And the regulations coexist with more trust. And this is the complementary relation. You see the linear positive slope graph called complementary. But there is also this theory which says that they are decoupled. They exist without any connection, right? Possibility. So we can look at any country, any organization, in any time and ask how much trust, how much regulation how do they exist together? And this is a question about association. Doesn't say that trust creates regulation or distrust creates regulation or vice versa. This is association. But we have also 2 options where trust and regulation are causally coexist. And this is the option of reinforcing and undermining. This is 2 other processes that we want to look or we want to allow people to think that they may be connected. And are part of our project, but we don't claim here that we prove them or corroborate them or disprove them. We just show them as an option. Why do I speak about those issues? Why this is very important? Why it's important for me, right? You might say that most of the social sciences, political science, public policy, treat trust and regulation as complementary. People want better regulation, and they believe that better regulation creates more trust. And vice versa. Trust in government allows us to accept the regulatory role of the state, of the regulatory state. But we don't have proof for that, right? We don't have empirical. This is sensible, but we don't have proof. The only proof that we have is for an opposite argument. What do I mean? In 2010, Agion et al., the economists, presented seminal paper that shows that countries where citizens distrust each other have more regulation. What they said really is that regulation is a product of culture of distrust. And they also argued that there are reciprocal relation, reverse relation, where more regulation create more distrust. This was 2010, and they did a seminal paper. The paper is being cited over 10,000 times. And this is the most substantive argument in favor of the substitution argument where trust and regulation crowd each other out. Now there were qualification and criticism for the paper and so on, but there was Hans Pitlick and his collaborator were one of those. He was one of those scholars, not the only one, but one of the main scholars who qualified this argument. But there was no effort to show empirically across time and across countries that other relation exists. And this is what we are doing here in this paper. We look at surveys of world value surveys. We take trust. We look at different data sets on regulation and check regulation. And we ask, what are relation between trust and regulation in those two? So in a way, it's a debate with Aghion et al. And Aghion got a Nobel Prize in economics just a year ago, this year actually. So it's good to have a debate with such a senior leading scholar. He and his co-authors. So the issue is really, when we look around the countries in the world, what do we see in terms of the relation between trust and regulation? And one thing that we do, and is important, is we don't say that all trust is the same. There are different types of trust, and there are different types of regulation. So we, as you will see soon, we go beyond Aghion et al. And look at different types of trust and different types of regulation. More types of regulation than Aghion did, and more types of trust that Aghion did. So I have to move quickly in order to meet the time expectation, time planning. I will continue sharing the presentation, and I will present something, another aspect of the study that might be important to understand, and will help Ilya later on to present the finding. When you look at the relation between trust and regulation, you can do it either within the countries or between countries. Between countries is, how does Brazil different, say, from Norway in the level of trust and the level of regulation? So between country, comparing countries. But we can also look and check what is the relations between trust and regulation within countries. How trust and regulation change within, say, Norway or Brazil across time. What was done by Aghion et al. Was that they checked the between country relations between trust and regulation, not within country. As you will see, there is a rationale for that, but it's a problematic rationale. When Ilya will speak about the results, you will see that most of the variation is between countries on trust and regulation. But this has implication for causality and the theory that we present later on. So I just introduce. We can check trust and regulation in these two levels. Now we have 4 hypotheses in the study. The first one is that trust and regulation are multidimensional, meaning that trust and regulation can or should be deconstructed to types of trust and types of regulation. It doesn't work in the same way in all type of trust and all type of regulation. And then the major hypothesis is H2. At the moment, we call it H2. The interaction is not only about substitutive relation or crowding out. It's also about decoupled relations and about complementary or supportive relations. And also we say something about the type of expectation, how strong will be the relations between trust and regulation, and to what extent they will reflect the national relations. So we say something like this, that in financial regulation, there is more emulation between countries. So the structure of financial regulation would reflect global norm more than national situation. And therefore, trust and regulation there will reflect something which is other than the national trust institution. This is H3. And then we did something else. We added the regulatory quality, something that was not done by Agion et al., the articles that we are speaking with, building upon. And we added the regulatory quality and say, in regulatory quality, we expect to see positive and strong relation between trust and regulation in a way that we will not see in the other spheres. Let me say or clarify that Agion et al. Only look at two regulatory spheres, and we are looking at 4. So the data. We have trust variables from World Value Survey. We focused on Web 5 to 7. We have country level data after aggregation. We did the calculation. The time frame is 2005, 2022. Depend on the type of variables that we have. On regulation variables, we check 4 spheres: market entry, labor regulation, financial regulation, and regulation quality. And we also include some control variables when we look at the relation between trust and regulation between countries and within countries. So those are the trust issues that we are looking on. You can see we have more than any others. We have 2, 4, 6 different trust indicators, and we have 4 regulatory indicators, 2 more than Agion et al. We included financial and regulatory quality. So, and you can see that for each of the 4 regulatory issues, we used 3 to 5 indicators for each of them. So we have, I guess, 4 and 5, 9, and 13. We have 16 indicators for regulation in 4 different spheres. And now for the analytical strategy. So this is the rationale, right? So now, how did we do the analysis, and what are the findings? This is the part of Ilya. Ilya, please.
Thank you very much, David. Now I'm sharing the presentation.
I took too long, but anyway, you will manage. Go on as you planned.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So yeah, as David mentioned, I'm turning from the theoretical framework and data to analytical or empirical strategy, and then findings. First of all, we have some general preconditions or general points which shape our empirical strategy, and I would like to focus on 2 points here in particular. The first point is that's bullet point number 3 in this list, is that we have chosen as our main metric of association between regulation and trust partial correlation coefficients. They are partial because we control on quite many variables. And there are several reasons why we have chosen correlation coefficients rather than, for instance, regression coefficients. One point is that correlation coefficients are strictly bounded. They are guaranteed to be bounded between -1 and 1. It is important in order to facilitate the comparability between many trust regulation pairs. We have a very wide range now of tests, including actually, I guess, 96 pairs. So comparability is really important in this context. And another point is that correlation coefficients are symmetric. We are not forced to choose either regulation variable or trust variable as our dependent outcome variable. And it actually conforms to the nature of our study, which is non-causal, and we do not claim any directionality. We avoid the language of effects, predictive effects, or causal effects. We are looking at associations, and correlation coefficients are especially fitting in this context for our purposes. But of course, they are directly related in almost all cases to regression coefficients, and in many cases they can be translated to each other. And the second point is that we're dealing with panel data, and almost by definition, panel data comprises different types of variance. And David has already mentioned that there are two aspects here, two types of variance, between country variance and within country variance. And I would just want to mention that we estimate separately between country associations and within country associations, between regulation and trust. Also, we have a couple of words about this point. We have a separate inferential strategy for testing the hypothesis about decoupled relationships. I believe you can remember the slide from David's part. So the idea is that relationships are decoupled if they are reliably, if the correlation coefficient is reliably near zero. And our strategy is to check whether the confidence interval for the correlation coefficient is really within some narrow range, narrow region around zero. I can delve into technical details here in principle, but I want just to save time. This is the whole idea, the most important point here. Also, we use several control variables and we combine them in different sets. We have, as you can see from this slide, 5 control variable sets for between country analysis and 6 control variable sets for within country analysis. And we also have decided to choose one control variable set, one of them as our focal set, which is constituted by liberal democracy from VDEM and locked GDP per capita. We have chosen one control variable set as the main one, just in order to make our analysis more focused, to prevent it from being unwieldy, and we use other control variable sets for robustness checks, basically. Now I'm turning to findings. First of all, the first hypothesis, I just want to remind that the first hypothesis is about the multidimensionality of regulation and trust. We used 2 tools to test this hypothesis. They are interrelated because they are both about correlational structure of trust variables set and regulation variables set. These 2 tools are correlation heat maps that allow us to see the structure of correlations, and also factor analysis. Of course, they corroborate each other. They are quite similar in their foundations, in the general idea behind them. And I show here only correlation heat maps because they are sufficient to see the point, actually. And also, I'm not going to focus much on that because this is more or less familiar, and and testing this hypothesis is not really problematic. So here you can see the correlation heat map for trust, wave 7 in particular, on this slide. And I do not suggest to look at the particular numbers. They are not really important here. What is important is the block structure that you can perceive from highlighting in different colors. What we can see in particular, for instance, is that there are different blocks clusters of trust variables, for instance, social trust variables and also institutional trust variables. And these two blocks are only weakly or at best moderately correlated with each other. And the general picture is quite similar, perhaps even more striking, for regulation variables. Once again, I do not suggest to look at numbers, just to perceive the general structure of this set of variables. Once again, we can see that there are some blocks. For instance, in the right lower corner, regulatory quality variables. They form a distinct sort of cluster of variables, and at the upper left corner, the cluster of regulation of market entry variables. And apart from that, we have many cells which are highlighted in pale colors, which means that many regulation variables are only weakly correlated with each other. Both pictures, both plots actually show that there is no such thing as regulation as such, or trust as such. No single latent factor like trust or regulation can account for the variance of trust and regulation variables. What it means is that we have to speak about different types, different forms, different aspects of regulation and trust. We have to disaggregate both regulation and trust in order to analyze them in a sort of more justified and warranted way. So this is a sort of precondition for our further analysis. The first hypothesis is really strongly supported. Trust and regulation are multidimensional phenomena. And now I'm turning to other findings where you do other hypotheses. And first of all, about associations between regulation and trust in the between country analysis. This table tries, I'm not sure that it does it successfully, but at least it tries to summarize our findings for between country associations. Trust, as you can see, trust variables are in columns and regulation variables, all 16 of them are in rows. And basically, each cell conveys some information about the association between corresponding types of regulation and trust. And there are two pieces of information associated with each cell. First, highlighting, and second, the label robust or suggestive. Highlighting means that there is reasonable evidence for negative or positive direction of association. Apricot color means negative association, and teal or some kind of green color means positive association. The second piece of information is labeling. So we have two kinds of labels, robust and suggestive. Robust means that associations, this particular association is statistically significant across all our control variable sets and after correction for multiple testing. So we can be really sure that there is some kind of empirical pattern. And also suggestive label means that evidence is weaker, but it's still at least tentative. It's reasonable to believe that there is some kind of pattern here, some kind of positive or negative association, because this label suggestive means that the results are statistically significant for main control sets and some other control variable sets, but not across all 5 control sets. So this is the degree of our sort of the degree of warranty, the degree of our belief in the evidence. And there are several patterns that we can extract, so to say, from this table. They're summarized on this slide. First, regulatory quality is robustly and positively associated with basically all types of trust. And hereby we also confirm our fourth hypothesis, which is in particular about regulatory quality and institutional trust. The second pattern is related to relation of market entry. Here we can observe that not all, but some types of regulation of market entry are negatively associated with both social and institutional trust. In particular, those aspects of relational market entry are negatively associated with trust, which are about procedural barriers. Basically, as you can see from this table, notice what we have in the first two rows: number of procedures or steps required to open a business, and also time and days required to open a business. And we can see that these two rows are systematically related to trust. So these are both procedural barriers, the degree of these barriers, and they systematically seem to be systematically associated with trust. And this in itself has, I think, two bearings on Agio and Natal's paper. First, in general, we reproduce and corroborate their findings because they also showed that there is such a negative relationship between procedural barriers on the one hand and institutional trust on the other hand. But also we show that not all trust, not all types of market and regulation are associated with trust, because there are two other variables, cost and minimum capital, which have much less sort of justified or warranted association with trust. So the picture is a bit more nuanced that we can observe in that classical paper by Agio and al. Also, a couple of words about relation of labor. Once again, some types of relation of labor are negatively associated with trust. But what is interesting is that we can observe a kind of selective affinity here, because as you can see, I believe from this slide, we have a kind of structure here, because these highlighted cells for labor category are mostly at the right side of the table, where institutional trust lives. And that might be interesting because apparently relation of labor is not systematically related to social trust, but it seems to be more systematically related to institutional trust. This is interesting in itself, and it might be the subject for some kind of discussion and further analysis. And finally, financial regulation, we found when testing our decoupled hypothesis that financial regulation is the best candidate, the main candidate for this claim that financial regulation has a decoupled or especially weak relationship with trust. The evidence is somewhat weaker than for other hypotheses, but at least it is tentative, it is suggestive, and it is also sort of aligned with this table, because as you can see, there are particularly there are practically no highlighted cells in this finance category. But once again, we test the decoupled relationship hypothesis separately. That's a separate procedure. So this is a general overview of this main hypothesis, and now I'm turning to within country associations. The major thing is that unfortunately or not unfortunately, no results are statistically significant for the in-country associations. But it doesn't mean that we cannot say anything at all substantively about within-country associations, because we can try to understand what are the reasons between this failure to achieve statistical significance. What are the plausible causes behind this failure? Of course, there are many possible causes, possible reasons, but we can come up with some educated guesses, with some reasonable conjectures, with some reasonable suspicions, so to say. And one of the things that we established is that point estimates of correlation coefficients for within country associations are smaller than correlation coefficients for between country associations. So what it means is that within country associations tend to be smaller, closer to zero in absolute magnitudes than for the case of between country associations. For instance, on this slide, you can see that half of all within country associations for main control variable set are lower than 0.1 in absolute magnitudes. Also, we can show that in our data, at least, between country variation dominates within country variation for trust, for labor regulation, and for regulatory quality variables. And this also may underlie the prominence of between country associations in our analysis. And we find two patterns that are particularly suspicious in this regard, that might be particularly important for this failure in general, for this failure to establish to find statistical significance within country associations. The first pattern is that some regulation variables and also trust move only weekly across time, over time, and that makes within country associations difficult to detect reliably. But what is really important here is that they move weekly over time within our time frame, which is less than 20 years. So it doesn't mean that, for instance, across centuries, the picture would be the same. It might be the culprit might be our relatively narrow time frame. And the second point is that some regulatory variables move considerably even within our time frame. But if they do, they move mostly independently of trust. And that makes them more or less decoupled from trust. And therefore, the association is really weak, close to zero. So our conjecture, our educated guess, it's not a proof, it's a conjecture that trust and regulation within countries, this is about, once again, it's about within country analysis, can move relatively slowly over time. And the issue might be that to establish within country associations, we have to look at longer time frames, for instance, generations, or maybe even centuries, rather than several electoral cycles or policy cycles. If this is plausible, then it might mean that regulation and trust are related within countries at this level, are related at the relatively deep institutional and societal level layer that they sort of move together in this deeper infrastructure of societies. And if this is so, then our research is also connected with other research agendas, for instance, by Jamal and Robinson, North Wine-Westphalis, and some others. So some conclusions. First of all, very briefly, we have quite strong support for four of our hypotheses: that trust and regulation are multidimensional phenomena, that institutional trust and regulatory quality are positively related, that there are pairs of trust regulation relationships for which the association is positive, there are pairs for which it is negative, and we have not very strong but still suggestive evidence that financial regulation might be decoupled from trust. And the general takeaway is that different forms of trust and different forms of regulation are related differently, associated differently with each other. And what it means is that countries can have different configurations of trust and regulation. It depends on the types and aspects and forms of trust and regulation which we consider. And the major takeaway, I think, is that we have to go beyond to transcend the grand simplifying narrative that trust and regulation are associated in this and this in such and such way. Trust and regulation are associated differently depending on what kind of trust and regulation we consider. And what this means is that perhaps a more complicated, more sophisticated metaphor can be heuristically useful for thinking about regulation and trust. A metaphor of ecology, for instance, ecology of trust or an ecology of regulation and trust, because ecology is something that is internally structured, inherently internally structured, internally complex. And this might be useful to bear in mind when thinking about regulation of trust in order to pose especially fruitful questions in this area. Thank you so much for your attention, and we are looking forward for your questions, comments, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilya. I have so many things to say, but first question and answers from the audience. So please, anyone wants to start? If so, just get
I
into
can ask a question.
Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about regulatory quality. How do you match it with the analytical framework that David presented? So David was presenting the relationship between trust and regulation, different types of relationships, and all of the hypotheses seem like they belong to that framework. And except of regulatory quality, I felt like is it one type of regulation? Like, do you treat it the same way, or how does it fit with that question about the relationship between trust and regulation? Do you equal it with other regulation, or is it in a different level?
David, should I try to answer?
As you like. I can, you or
Uh,
try, you start.
Uh, well, I can. First of all, thank you very much, Libby, for this question. That's conceptually very important question, I believe. And yeah, I think it is really important to note that regulator quality is considered as situated at a different plane, so to say, than other regulatory variables, because those three other regulatory variables, financial regulation, regulation of entry, and labor regulation, they are, so to say, about quantity of regulation, intensity of regulation in terms of being lower or higher. But regulatory quality captures another aspect, qualitative rather than quantitative aspect. And we also use it in our analysis just in order to get a more sort of panoramic, complete picture. And regulatory quality is sometimes indeed considered separately from those quantitative aspects of regulation, but we believe that it might be useful to look at it also in conjunction with those more quantitative types of regulation, just in order to get a more complete picture.
Okay, thank you.
I will just add
Thank you.
that it might be useful in the future to see the interaction between regulatory quality and intensity as captured by the three other regulatory spheres, and to look at the relations of trust to this kind of interaction situation. But what we are speaking about, so what's the issue of this research agenda and so on? There is this argument that regulation is bad and trust is good, and we have less trust than we need. And my own sense or common sense suggests that regulation and trust can be good, can be bad, depends, right? So trust the trustworthy and use quality regulation or regulation in better regulation. And this is what the paper is about. It's just empirical demonstration that the possibilities of regulatory capitalism, meaning regulatory systems, institutions that govern society, is sensible. But, you know, it seems like Agion et al. Say no, but not only Agion et al. If you go to Dodge and Trump and Elon Musk and so on, people who are very, very prominent in many ways, right? They see the regulation as the problem. That's the issue. That's the issue. And this is not a minor issue in the political economy or democracy and so on. Central. Yes, Rennie, please.
Thank you both for the presentation. It was very interesting. Okay. Thank you both for the presentation. It was very interesting to listen the approach that you took regarding trust. And my question is close or following up on the one that we just heard, not only on the quality of regulation, but also on you talked about the trust may vary depending on the area, on the regulatory area, and I was wondering if you had any information on whether it varies also on the type of citizen or business that are involved in the area or with the regulation. Because I was reading a research recently that for me was a bit surprising to see that people that are, I was expecting that older people trust more regulation than younger people, or something age related, or something economic activity related. But then I saw that this research said that it was people that were part of the policy making process. So people that were able or thought that they were able, had the impression that they were able to be part of, be it by participating in public consultations or in forums or sort of those policy-making parts of the regulation. So I was wondering if you had a look into that, or it's just trust in general.
Ilya, please.
Thank you, Rennie. Thank you for this question. I think it's really important in principle, but as far as I understand the question, it seems that it largely lies beyond our paper because of some problems with the data. Because as far as I understand the question, it's about individual level, whether individuals or some groups trust more or less. The problem is that our trust data come from voluntary survey, which do not comprise specific questions regarding trust, regarding regulation as such. So our regulation variables are not located at the individual level; they're located only at country level, and that actually severely limits our possibilities to conduct individual level analysis. That's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we opted for country level analysis. But certainly I perceive, and I think David also perceives this paper as a kind of first step in the direction of further and more complete elaboration of the problem. And I think that individual level analysis and different hypotheses related to that level are supremely important. So I think that we have to think about the possibility of implement this analysis in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, Rennie and Ilya, and Shahaf, please.
Ilya, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting, and it's something that we work on regarding the trust in companies, in major companies. I wonder, when I came to the data, I saw that there are many variables that measure regulation, that measure regulatory quality. And maybe I missed that in your presentation, but are these variables, are there any variables that you can use that will go backwards by time? I mean, because when as you remember from our presentation, we saw a change in the relationships between trust or types of trust after 2000. So I wonder if you could collect data that will show you a bit, earlier than 2005. And I would love if you could elaborate on the decision that you made regarding the choosing each of these regulatory variables, especially when it comes to the regulatory quality, that there are very strong correlations between the measures of regulatory trust, no, not regulatory quality. So how did you decide which one to use and why?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shahab. These are important questions related to empirical strategy, actually. And I think there are two questions. One about this change in time, and the second question is about our set of regulatory quality variables. Regarding the first question, we didn't explore this question. It was not in our hypothesis. But I think we may consider whether it would be interesting to think about it, especially because there is some kind of intersection between two papers, right? The paper that you're working on and this paper. Yeah, I think it might be interesting also because we have very similar data for trust, but somewhat different in regulation. So I think it's worth thinking about. So I do not have substantive answer to this question because it was not an analysis, but I think the idea is really good. I have substantive answer to the second question regarding our regulatory quality analysis variables and other variables as well. Actually, I can show once again the slide with all these variables in order to
Not now, Ilya. Let's.
Okay.
You can do it. We should meet as a group. So.
Okay, just a couple of words. Basically, we have 16 regulatory variables in our analysis, and we analyzed all 16. So there was not the choice. It's not the decision that we used this and not this. Partially this is for robustness checks. Partially this is because these sort of variables are not copies of each other, and they sort of cover different aspects of regulation and regulatory quality in particular. One of the implications of that great number of tests is that we had to control for multiple testing. We also did that, and all the results that I shared, they were statistical and are statistically significant after this correction for multiple tests. So yeah, we used all the data that we gathered. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So we have Sharon, Eti, and Meital. Please, Sharon.
Hi, thank you, David and Ilya. Fascinating, really, really fascinating. I have a question for you, David, and then a question for Ilya. David, at what point and why, because I'm not a regulation scholar, I'm a trust scholar, why would regulation be considered bad? If anything, it would be a good thing. I think over-regulation would be a bad thing, maybe. But without regulation, we would all be living within the laws of the jungle, and we would all be, I don't know, at each other's throats. So I don't see why regulation would be a bad thing. Also, the positive and negative relationships between trust and regulation, could it be that also low trust, but also high trust is associated with high regulation? Could that be an issue? And Ilya, I have so many questions about the analytical strategy, but what I would like to see, if that would be maybe a possibility, I don't know, is going deeper down into the trust, the individual level trust indicators within a regulatory context. Maybe try to model that and see if anything within a country comes up, because I find it hard to believe that there are no associations within country. Another question was, did you try to divide the countries between high trust countries and low trust countries? But I found it fascinating. Thank you very much.
Okay, just a short answer to why regulation is bad. Not only because Trump and Netanyahu and most of the right-wing politicians are saying so, also because regulation serve the powerful, right? They are made by the powerful for the people. Oh, I don't know. Hopefully so, but sometimes for their own interests. Regulations serve regulation, democracy, and so on are being built with rules that privilege some groups on the expense of the others. So there are many good reasons from different implications that regulation will not be optimal. And we live in a world which is, there is a culture of rules. Let's do rules for everything. And in the universities, organization, and so on, we find this kind of tendency to have more and more rules. It's the common medicine for every social, political, economic problem. So, yeah. So this is my part now. Ilya, shortly to the point, to other points, and then we have Eti and Meital.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharon. These are important. I mean, there are two questions. The first one is about within variance, and the second about distinction between high trust and low trust countries. Regarding the first question, I think that it partially intersects with the question that also Reni posed, and I think once again, it potentially is very important to go at this individual level. But we have these limitations regarding our data. Within analysis that we conducted was not across individuals within countries. It is within, in sense that it is over time that we take each country and see what is the dynamics of trust and regulation association over time, and from this point of view, I think what you propose is a different direction, which is very interesting, I think, which changes the access of analysis from time to individuals. I think it's really important, but once again, the question is whether we can find the appropriate data to implement this analysis, and I think that's a major issue. We have to think about it. And the second question is about high and low distinction, high trust and low trust countries. In this particular paper, we do not analyze this distinction explicitly, but we analyze it implicitly because our between country analysis is in a significant extent about this distinction. And we can see that countries indeed differ. Those countries which have high trust tend to have low regulation, market entry regulation, and vice versa. But another question, which I think should be, or at least might be the subject of another paper, is exploring the total configurations of all trust profiles and all regulation profiles. And I can say that I partially implemented this analysis as well. And some partners are really interested. For instance, there are different types of hard trust societies. One type is societies with liberal economic regimes like New Zealand or the United States, and they have different profiles than, for instance, Nordic countries. And this is very, very interesting because it shows that there are different sort of ways, maybe strategies to achieve good economic, social, other kinds of performances. This is fascinating. Thank you.
Now, Eti, please.
Thank you for the interesting presentation. I was wondering about H4. What is the theoretical mechanism underlying the positive relationship between institutional trust and regulatory quality? I mean, do you see trust as enabling governments to adopt higher quality regulation because they face fairer legitimacy constraints?
Yeah.
Thank you. Or do you think the causal direction mainly runs the other way, that higher regulatory quality generates institutional trust? Thank you.
So what we did in this paper is to look at association, right? Not causality. But we do have causality ideas, and they are presented here, right? If you look at this slide, where is it? Up. Yeah. Yeah. So positive relations between trust and regulation is the idea that rules serve society, and society can nurture trust in institution and in other non-familiar and non-familiar people, because they are living under a good regime. They have the right rules. You can call it Torah or religious rules or civil rules, or just the state as protector from the jungle of the natural situation, right? And this is a very basic idea, the reinforcement. But how can you prove it, right? That's the major challenge that we have. How to look at societies and to show that better regulation produces trust. And this is not a simple issue, not least because the rate of change of regulation and rate of change of trust is different. It's not that if the trust declines, that you can fix it immediately or even in the medium term via better regulation, and vice versa. So that's the expectation. I think this is also common sense, in the sense that good institution bring good or allow the development of good culture, good society, and vice versa. So it's given, and we could show the connection, but only in between countries, not within countries, and not at the individual level for that. Yeah, that's my answer. Do you want to add, Ilya?
No, basically, yeah.
Maybe other aspects that I didn't bring into it. So time ends. I hope you had interesting you have an interesting presentation, and I welcome comments. Please write to us with comments, and I'd love to hear your point of view. Thank you, Ilya, and thank you all for your participation. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you all. Thank you.